Welcome to Hyperspace Prospector. I will be discussing The Living Force by John Jackson Miller. This was definitely not what I expected. It's not a story-driven book. It's not even really a character-driven book either. It's like a series of vignettes about various members of the Jedi Council, and it really ties into the theme of the title, which is the force that you would find in other people, in small acts, in everyday life, I guess you could say, versus the cosmic force. As a result, I found this to be a very quiet, contemplative, almost meditative read. This is not going to be High Republic that sweeps you into a story and then you're just like the entire time. It is also not an in-depth character sketch like you might get in, say, Phasma. When reading this book, I spent most of my time going, wait, Ki-Adi-Mundi doesn't get ice mounds with any flavor? Oh my goodness, now he's giving dating advice? Nice. There's not going to be a moment where you're like, that was amazing! Except perhaps the very end. That was a bit of a twist I wasn't expecting. I learned a lot of tidbits about characters I didn't know that much about. That being said, I don't think I would reread it. In fact, shameless plug, but if you are on my Instagram, I'll probably be posting what I end up doing with this book. I'm thinking of donating it. If you're someone who reads Star Wars novels and are not really that into Star Wars, you just think they're good stories, not the novel for you. But if you read Star Wars novels because you just like Star Wars, definitely pick this up. It had some fascinating insights. I'm going to jump into my running thoughts. I do talk about some story elements, but I also try to keep the big reveals under wraps in case you haven't read the book. To start with, I liked how they bridged between the end of the High Republic era and what became the Clone Wars era. What we're seeing here is the old Jedi outposts that were such a big deal during the High Republic are closing. Partly because of political reasons, the Chancellor is just like, eh. And partly because of financial reasons. If the corporations pull out, that planetary system kind of, well, collapses. And then the Jedi are like, well, might as well leave too. We see how much influence the Republic has in where the Jedi go. And of course, who runs the Republic? Money, the corporations, the bureaucrats. That scene we saw in The Phantom Menace.
The true rulers of the Republic, and on the payroll of the Trade Federation, I might add. This is where Chancellor Valorum's strength will disappear.
Yes, he was trying to manipulate her, but he was not wrong. And we're seeing it in this book. Adi Gallia, who really fascinated me as a teenager when I first saw her in Phantom Menace, had a bit of a crush on her, I'll be honest, features fairly heavily in this story. And she's kind of caught where she's become the bureaucrat of the Jedi. Always doing paperwork, always in meetings, always trying to go, okay, well, according to the numbers and what the Senate wants, we have to close this outpost, we have to go here, and it's taken over her life. I felt so sorry for her. And when the Jedi leave, that's the last remnant of order and justice in that system. And Qui-Gon is the one who kind of notices this, and he's like, look, what we're seeing is a pattern. Republic leaves, corporations leave, Jedi then leave, anarchy, pirates, the entire hyperspace route becomes overrun and unusable. And when you can't go on the hyperspace route, then nobody's going to come bring money to that system, and then it gets worse. It's like a cycle. And Qui-Gon's like, we have to break this cycle. And the only way we can do that is by not leaving. Even though it's illogical, even though the Republic And the Senate is like, why are you still there? The Jedi need to listen to the living force. There are lots of cute little moments that I jotted down. One of them was Plo Koon, who's talking about the young Padawan Obi-Wan. I hope Qui-Gon doesn't get him into any trouble.
Promise me you will train the boy. Yes, Master.
That advice didn't work out. I also noted that Palpatine actually had a fairly good idea. Do not point out a problem unless you have a solution to present alongside. In other words, don't come along and go, that's not working. You have to say, that's not working. And this is my solution that I'm proposing. I like that. There's also some humorous moments. Zelastra, who's like the pirate queen of the Riftwalkers, keeps finding stowaways. And it gets to the point where she's just like, I've got to make sure there isn't a cantina band hiding under the deck plates. I really enjoyed her character. I hope she comes up in other media. I would love to see her in live action. I don't recall hearing about her anywhere else. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments. Is she in any of the comics or something? I'd be curious because her character seems really cool. The closest equivalent to a main story we have is Depa, who is undercover as Hotwire. And I couldn't help thinking, she's really good at pretending to fit in and not be a Jedi. They're not onto her for quite a while, and so was she able to pass along some of that skill set to Kanan? Like, is part of why he was able to survive because of what Depa taught him? Back to Adigalia, talking about why the Jedi leave. Places fall out of favor. We serve the Senate. This was really interesting to read soon after Phasma, because the whole point of that book was that part of why the First Order was able to come to power so easily is that they noticed these Outer Rim planets who were starving, who were in pain, who were desperate, who the Republic had said, not worth our trouble. The First Order shows up, takes the kids who just want something to eat, someone to pay attention to them, turns them into these stormtroopers, turns them into people like Captain Cardinal. And they're able to just rip away all the resources of these planets because no one cares. And here we have a member of the Jedi Council kind of on board with this Republic attitude of like, well, I mean, they're not rich and nobody really needs anything from them, so why waste resources on them? The Republic had this attitude. The Jedi, I'm sorry, had that attitude. The First Order went in and went, no, you are all wrong. They are resources. None of these people are good. And that's why I love that we get Rey starting the new Jedi Order. And I am so excited about this new film because she comes from one of these Outer Rim planets that got ignored. She's not going to have the attitude of the Jedi in this book. She's not going to have the attitude of the First Order. She sees them as people, as the living force, and not to get preachy. But this is why I love Rey, and this is why I think it's so significant that she chose Tatooine in the end as like her base. Not one of those big, rich planets. This is the strength of Miller's writing, being able to bridge these gaps to point out what attitudes led to the fall of the Jedi. And this is one of them. Qui-Gon looks at all of this with an attitude very much like Rey, and he is marked as an extremist. Like we saw Count Dooku also questioning this.
Jedi claim peace, but mostly keep law and order for the rich and powerful.
And so this leads to a discussion about Quen. A planet that used to be really important and has completely fallen into disrepair. And finally, Qui-Gon is able to convince Mace Windu to stand up and say, wait. Rather than blindly doing what the Senate is suggesting, let's go look ourselves first. Let's see if it's salvageable before we just go, and closed. Depa talks about a place once the Jedi leave. Homes become hovels. Children become gangsters. Again, the book is very meandering and doesn't have any cohesion story-wise, but it almost makes it easier to pick it up and put it back down again. Temptation of the Force, great book, but you get so sucked in that you're like reading nonstop and it's 3 a.m. and you need to go to bed. This is not one of those books. You can be like, oh, I'll read a couple chapters and go, oh, that was really, really nice. All right, go on to bed. Another interesting thing I noticed was that Master Sifo-Dyas is held in absolute awe because of all his futuristic visions. Multiple times we had people go, oh, well, I mean, if Master Sifo-Dyas thought that, yeah, of course. This explains a lot as to why we get Obi-Wan finding out, oh, Master Sifo-Dyas commissioned this entire army. And he goes, oh, well, I mean, if Master Sifo-Dyas thought so, I guess this is what we need to do. There was a cute little tie-in. The library at the Jedi Outpost has a shrine to Avar. Apparently, it was an area she liked to come and read in. And I can just imagine like a little hollow photo of her, maybe with her famous speech. And this lovely alcove of the library with High Republic imagery that the pirates then blew up. But anyway, I thought it was sweet. This is a super nerdy thing, but I love that it was put in. Some of you may or may not know, I used to be a maritime historian, specifically about the fur trade on the Northwest Coast. And for Disneyland fans, you know that ship, Columbia? If you want to know any facts about her, like Nancy the goat was on board, let me know. Balo pointed out, you do not put the in front of a ship name when discussing the ship. So you don't say the surprise, you say surprise.
After all, surprise is on our side.
And I know this is so nerdy, but I actually put the book down and applauded. Because it's like, it's so tiny, but it really annoys me when I read books and they're talking about ships and they're like, yes, the Ghost went out. I'm like, no. I think this was the moment I really got on board with the book. All right, so Zelastra wants to turn Quen into the new Nasa. She is basically Captain Flint from Black Sails. She has been hurt horrendously badly by those she trusted. In his case, it was the Navy. In her case, it was the Jedi. She wants revenge, simultaneous to wanting to build something precious where people can be safe, where people can be loved. And by people, we mean pirates. Not the average citizen. Those are going to get... I just noticed this. I think it's why I liked her so much. She is so much like Captain Flint. Does that make Kyla Long John Silver? Back to Captain Balo. He was not entirely happy with the Jedi either. He has a kind of grudging respect for them. But he had this to say. You just go blithely by, expecting everyone to drop everything, and then you're gone. And we are left to repair the damage. We saw this a lot in Clone Wars. The Jedi would come into an area, they'd do all this heroic stuff, they would win the battle or whatever it was, and then whoop, off they go. What can I say except you're welcome? And the populace is just like, we got to see that up close and personal in the final season with Ahsoka.
They've forgotten all about us. What do you mean? It's just, when you're a kid, you hear stories. I guess they're not what I thought they'd be. We'll get away from the Jedi.
There's a Jedi mantra: peace, knowledge, serenity, harmony, force. And yet they don't follow it. And that is what's fascinating about what happened in Order 66. Had the Jedi been following this mantra, they would not have been generals. They would not have been in the middle of all these clones. I'm just pointing this out. I really like how complex and not just the good guys they are in this book. They're not bad people. They aren't. They're just not thinking through the consequences of their actions. One person who is getting involved is Plo Koon. And I read this and was like, that is the most Plo Koon thing I've ever heard. He ends up in the middle of an angry mob of citizens. Why? Because he's trying to save one droid. He's like the Doctor in Doctor Who. Really. I love his character. The Republic no longer, if it ever, represents peace and justice. It's like the latest Bridgerton season when Lady Featherington was like, Featheringtons stick together. And everyone in the room just started laughing and just like, have you met a Featherington? Are you kidding? It's gotten to the point in pre-Clone Wars where someone's like, yes, I mean, the Republic represents peace and justice. And everyone's just like, are you kidding me? What? No. And as a result, people are scared, people are depressed, they are losing hope. And there's a beautiful scene between Morna and Yaddle. Okay, I started out as a very huge Yaddle fan because of course, the laundry scene. But this just, out of all the Jedi in the time of the prequels, she is hands down my favorite. Like, Orla is always going to be my favorite overall. But Yaddle, close second there, close second. Morna says, I should be happier. She's talking about how depressed she is. And Yaddle responds, you should be you. To deny how you feel would be to deny your very self. Don't pretend to be happy when you're not. But Yaddle's answer to fear is this: courage leads to peace. Peace leads to love. And love leads to healing. Courage comes first. Morna sighed. I've been scared all the time. No matter where I've lived, it's all the same everywhere. Nobody cares about anyone else. They get mad if you do care, as if there's something they know that you don't. And Yaddle responds later, the Jedi spend their whole lives trying to see that light in themselves and in others. It's part of something larger. You are part of something larger. The Force exists for everyone. I've come very close to closing my main reactions channel last week. I was getting 90% really nasty comments. To be honest, on this channel, I get a lot too. But I mean, it's Star Wars, you kind of expect that. And I really liked this quote, that it seems like everywhere you go, or in this case, the internet, people get angry that you like something. You'll be all, I love Rose in The Last Jedi. And they'll be like, how dare you? Why are you so angry? simply because someone else enjoys something? What is it that causes this? And I kind of like that they pretty blatantly brought it up in this book. And I felt like this whole scene was a little bit of a to the Tantrum Menace. Onto an amusing scene. Page 258, we get a line from Obi-Wan Kenobi. Do you want to guess what that line was? Hello there. Uriel was cracking me up through the whole book as well. He's lived a long time, and so he gets bored with behaving in certain ways, and his current thing he likes to do is just be fun and silly and tell dad jokes and stuff. Ki-Adi-Mundi is the opposite. He's very serious. Uriel just cannot help himself because he keeps just like at Ki-Adi-Mundi. And his latest one was, he walks in and goes, he could turn a party into a wake. Like, Uriel, leave the poor man alone. I was crushed to find out one of the facts about Bacta tanks, though. They don't help with insomnia and sleep deprivation. Which means even if I got a Bacta tank, yeah, it would help with some of my chronic conditions, but it would not help with my insomnia and sleep deprivation. This is so disappointing. There goes my excuse to go visit Boba Fett. I'm kidding, I'll still go. There were so many inside jokes in this that I don't think future people would necessarily get. The pirate skiff, aka yacht, was sunk by orcos. If you somehow missed the 10 million memes about orcas sinking yachts, I am certain this was a joke about that. Towards the end of the book, we started shifting focus into attachments. And this is always a fascinating conversation with Jedi. So many different opinions on it. Eth meets someone who kind of ends up liking him. And he has this conversation with her, which is very interesting considering we just touched on this in the last episode of The Acolyte with Osha and Jackie. I suppose people can care about what happens to individual Jedi, but you don't get to care back. Oh, we certainly care, Eth said, but in the context of caring for all life. All life? She smirked. So like trees? Fungus? Attorneys? Sort of. That's flattering. I guess I'm included then. But you don't get more specific. He shook his head. It's kind of in the bylaws. I'm pretty sure it's still canon that Eth ends up leaving and being with someone. I think they even have a kid, as I recall. I can't help wondering if this is the conversation that kind of gets the wheels turning a little bit in his head, going, maybe I want more. Maybe I do want to care for some individual people. In fact, I would say the main theme of this book is that indifference to individual pain is worse than attachments. Deba had a line that I'll leave you with, which really spoke to me. Other people are not the canvas on which you can paint your grief and your anger. You may be upset for very legitimate reasons, but other people are not the canvas on which to paint that. And this also means you can push back. If people are treating you that way, block them. Tell them off. Don't let yourself become their canvas. You don't have to sit there and take it. So again, do I plan to take this and reread it 10 million times like I did with The Fallen Star? No. Am I glad that I read it? Did I take notes that will probably stay with me the rest of my life? Yes. At worst, you will be able to go to the fair and order plain ice and walk around eating it, pretending you're Kiarimundi. You know you want to.